Welcome everyone. My name is Erich Smith. I am the Director of Learning and Development at Hopeworks, which currently is located in Camden, New Jersey, right across the river. But we will be in December. Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be in Philly, let's just say the start of the new year. Hopeworks, what we do is, I mean, great picture here sort of demonstrates, but it's we like to say workforce development organization, preparing young professionals for work in the technology fields as well as presenting in GIS. Trauma-informed presentations is also a big part of not just what we do, but how we operate and serve as an organization. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Yes, I am Ciara Williams. I'm actually an intern at Hopeworks. My position is a Hopeworks training team intern, and what I do is that I go out to different companies and I just inform them about toxic stress and how to maneuver in a trauma-informed practices, because Hopeworks has initiated that into their company. So I'm just basically training other companies on how to format Hopeworks as.
Awesome. Yeah, and so it's very important, and with the pandemic, there was it was a huge change for everyone, just in terms of how we operated, communicated, and collaborated. But what was really most important about that as well is that we were in other people's houses. We were, sort of a part of their lives. I mean, from simple stuff of cats walking across the keyboard to kids fighting in the background to, just getting to see how people live in general. And what we wanted to do with this workshop was to talk about that sort of holistically, and then also talk about and demonstrate some of the practices that we use at Hopeworks, in the hopes that folks also begin to start to think about that, because the return, which is still ongoing, is hard for a lot of folks. Folks are resisting coming into the office every day. Folks are opting to be in the office two or three times a week, just because, again, such a sudden shift in the middle of getting comfortable with a new situation that we were in. So again, it brings about a level of trauma, or at least being able to have the toolkit of trauma-informed practices to make that return easier, not just for ourselves, but also for our coworkers, and potentially maybe change how we operate within our organizations using trauma-informed approaches. We will also highlight some technology that can be used to help move that along and to support those efforts in different organizations and companies. So what we'll do is, there's going to be a little interactive piece, but we also have materials that we make sure that everyone has. So I think we're ready to start. If you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to just raise your hand. I feel like that's just because of the limited amount of time that we have. If there are questions and we want to get to those, we'll make sure that this PowerPoint goes out to everyone, and a lot of the resources have been printed out as well if you want to take those. So the focus of this workshop, as I said, is the pandemic-inspired practices. What are we keeping from the last 2 years? We want to focus on the good of the last 2 years. There was a lot of bad, a lot of adjustment, and also really how to work through those. So what we hope we're going to touch on with everyone is strategies to build and keep empathy and understanding in the workplace, everyday practices to manage emotions and well-being, top 10 office practices and tools to support working from home, because we understand that many folks are still working from home, and we want to make sure that they don't feel disconnected, and again, different things that they can do to, still feel comfortable working from home, and talking points to discuss with coaching, staff and participants.
Alright, so now I'm going to talk about changing the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. So I'm going to tell you a story about a young man named Carlos. So before COVID, he was working at this amazing company. Like, everything was going good for this guy. But unfortunately, there's just like any businesses, you have to be professional. But he just wasn't being professional. He was eating, always on the phone. He was not attending the meetings, and the biggest point of it all is just he was late all the time, but they had to give it to him because at least he was consistent with it, right? So unfortunately, many times they had to talk to him about his behavior, and he just wasn't, cleaning up. So they had to fire him and let him go. And it kind of stamped it with an email just saying, there's better opportunities out for you. This isn't the proper place for you to be. We wish you good luck. So when COVID did happen, he was just kind of, doing what he can. He was working at fast food restaurants. He was just trying to get a good paying job. So to give a little background on Carlos, when he was 8 years old, his mom died of a terminal illness. And it was hard for him. It was just him and his dad and his younger brother. So it was just a normal day for him, having fun and just living life. And unfortunately, one day, his dad was taken away from him. His dad was deported and left 2 minors at the time alone. So it was very hard. So he had to drop out of school. He had to be the adult in the situation, the parent to his brother. So he had to do what he can, So during this hard time, especially with COVID, just being isolated and just doing all he could, he ended up getting an opportunity at Hopeworks. So he took the tour. He really loved the environment, the place, and I'm like a little nervous. But anyway, so he ended up like going to Hopeworks, and from that point on, it was very different environment, very positive, and he just wasn't used to it. His behavior remained the same, unfortunately. But the only difference is that at Hopeworks, we asked, what happened to you? Hey, why are you always eating in the kitchen? And he would respond, well, I have to eat here. I can't eat at home because all that food goes to my brother. How come you're always on the phone? How come you're not attending meetings? How come you're always late? Because I'm fearful that my brother could be taken away from me. I feel like someone could take him away. Or someone might call me and I have to be the voice of an adult, right? Like, what am I supposed to do? So the thing about this is, like, it's important to change the question. I feel like before COVID, we were all just kind of going through the emotions and just kind of figure this world out, just this business. So we are all experiencing collective trauma, and that's why it's important. And when I mean collective trauma, with the pandemic, we all experienced it together. We may have different experiences. People may have not even noticed it was trauma. It's just kind of, I'm isolated, gotta go through these motions, what can I do, and stuff like that. So with Carlos, it's just important to highlight that, even though he'd been through those past experiences, right, we may never know them until we ask the question of, hey, what's going on? How can we help you? How can we assist you? How can we, what can we do? Because he's a person. And it's important for each employee, each staff member to realize, like, everyone has their individual baggages that they're carrying, especially with the pandemic and all these false informations coming out, and just, it seems like it's just gonna keep going and going. Like, one day we're not in quarantine, then next thing you know, we are in quarantine. Next thing you know, we have masks, and next thing you know, we don't have masks. So it's just to be aware of people's situations, and not even that, because we're all human beings. How can we be helpful to each other?
Yeah, and with collective trauma, I think that it is something that, and literally in preparing for this, that was the first time that I heard that term, collective trauma. Again, we've all had similar experiences, and even though, our backgrounds may be different, there are aspects of it, again, changing the question. So we may not have the same background as Carlos, but changing the question will also help. And that's just sort of like an introduction to ways that you can start to change how we not just communicate with each other, but are able to relate and try to sort of support each other. We have our own trauma, and that may be a weight within itself, and no one else, it's hard to take on someone else's trauma, but collectively we can also work together within an organization to make sure that, that we're supportive of each other. So, and then this gets into everyday practices and emotions and well-being, things that we can actively do at work with our coworkers to make sure these are very straightforward ways to support each other. And so one of the resources I have up here, a Harvard Business Review article about if you can't empathize with your employees, you better learn to. And this is the new reality for companies and organizations, is that we do have to consider those aspects of, staff, employees, coworkers, so that, simply put, we can operate more efficiently as an organization. So when we talk about the 6 ways to practice empathy, it says classroom, but this can be applied everywhere. And this is something that we do at Hopeworks on a daily basis. When we sit down and talk with young professionals, we have to listen actively and work on sort of not reacting to something that they're saying. And that goes to the second piece, withholding judgment. And if you want to go into that a little bit, that's fine. But withholding judgment really is just, it's a very unique thing. Very hard thing to do, I can say. When I started off initially, I just wanted to, just say my piece. But really, it's a practice that really important.
Yeah, so this is called active listening, and sometimes it's a hard thing to do because in a conversation, if someone's giving a negative aspect about you, you immediately want to jump in a conversation and correct them, like, I'm not like that. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So with active listening, it's very important, especially with holding judgment, because you may miss something important in conversation. Because the whole point of the conversation is not to bring someone down, but to point something out, like, hey, I think you can change this. Or, hey, I think you could do something different. So it's just all about regulating your emotions and feeling safe in a conversation, especially when it comes to a workplace. At Hopeworks, we have a lot of people, again, young professionals that come from all walks of life, and that's the same throughout every company. But with Hopeworks, the way it works is that we just sit down, if someone has a problem, we have a conversation. One person talks at a time, and they all just listen. So listening is the hardest part because sometimes we're not really hearing what someone's saying. It's just coming out the other ear and out the other. So the whole point is just how to practice this is to practice. Have conversations with your colleagues, have conversations with your family member, and just really, really listen. So we usually have an activity, but I'm just going to give you an example of what active listening is. So just to give a scenario, let's just say a report was late and it has to be done like today, but it was late. So you sit down, have a conversation with your employee, and you just, hey, I'm gonna have a conversation with you. I just want to know, hey, what's going on? Like, this report is late. Is there anything I can do? You just want to ask these open-ended questions. That way it's not yes or no response, because you're not getting anything from that, right? I'm pretty sure just having like a yes or okay or no, it's just, I need a little bit more from you kind of thing. So it's just all about patience, just being patient in the conversation and just really hearing a person out. Like, I mean, it's no excuse to be late, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if this is too much, how can we figure something out? Like, how can we change a situation where you're not overwhelmed or underwhelmed, or if you're always constantly late, okay, maybe you need to take off this project and give it to someone else that's more efficient in the situation. So like active listening, it can be difficult because again, the other person sometimes wants to interject, but at a certain point they do interject, and that comes when you're showing empathetic body language and just repeating the stuff. Okay, so how I understand it is, or okay, I see what you're saying, but can we, so it's just, again, always asking those very open-ended questions and just really hearing what the other person's saying, because you really want to listen, not just, okay, but you're kind of wrong kind of thing, because it's not proper, it's not appropriate in the workplace. So you just want to be able to make sure that you're safe in the conversation, the other person's safe in the conversation. It's just overall effective, because that's what you want.
Yeah, that's a really important word, is safety. Safety in the conversation. And we say it's safe. It's, you know, somebody's late with a report. It's not like, you know, we're talking about physical safety, but we're talking about emotional and well-being, so that the person is able to, one, a lot of times, again, with the example of a late report, which has happened to myself, but again, communicating beforehand, and I know that I'm going to be safe bringing it to someone to say, hey, we might be a few hours late with this, or we might need to push this to tomorrow. Being understanding, you know, when you're around understanding people, that there will be understanding. Deadlines are, you know, a pretty hard thing, but incorporating understanding in your daily interactions, again, really makes the difference. Practicing mindfulness, what does that mean exactly? And I put it like this. Again, we have working with young professionals that are growing into their professionalism. They're not always going to hit the mark. And, you know, if someone's coming in late, we had a meeting that was going to start, the first reaction is, you know, you want to ask, why are you late? But what I go through a process of, I'll go back to the last time that I was late and the understanding that I expected or hoped to get, and sort of extend that to them. Whether I received it or not, I try to extend it to them because I was in that same place. And so practicing mindfulness in that way is really helpful in understanding, but then it also opens up the doorway for correction. So being understanding also gives us the ability to also make suggestions and give guidance so that they're able to move past certain things. Yes?
Hi.
Hello?
So I'm wondering, like, it makes sense to me, this is a little devil's advocate too. I don't think I really believe this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What do you say, like, you're giving this presentation to an employer, not in Hopeworks. You know, how do you sell this to someone who basically says, like, it's not my job? Like, I think, like, there's a space to say, like, I want to be understanding and I want to be patient, and, like, I understand that this young professional is young and that I'm here to coach them, but also, like, in the situation of Carlos, let's say, like, if you are consistently late and if you are consistently missing meetings and if you are consistently taking all these personal calls on work time, like, at what point do you say, I want to be empathetic to you and I'm asking you the right questions and I appreciate that you're giving me these honest, transparent answers, but I also need an employee who is going to be at meetings, and, you know, like, how do you balance? I think that it's like a two-part question. Like, how do you balance being understanding and empathetic, but also knowing that, like, this person is here to do a job and, like, that needs to happen, and then also, like, how do you pitch this to companies that are like, I don't know, this person should just go to therapy, like, if they want this kind of support. Like, that's not my job.
Right. Well, and that's a great question, thank you. One of the things is that trauma-informed practices doesn't start at that moment, right? So it's something that the employers have to want in the workspace. If they don't, then it's an uphill battle. And those type of conversations won't happen. One of the biggest ways is through coaching. So again, a lot of what you mentioned were conversations that you would have in a coaching session. And it's part of, like, developing leaders. Sometimes when you develop leaders, that's where you're starting from. Like, you really believe in that person, but you understand that there are some things that they have to work through. That should show up in coaching. And so with companies, coaching for staff at every level, if they're able to do that or open to doing that, that's a great place to start. Also, again, just making staff aware and employees aware that it is a safe space, and having employers speak to that from their standpoint. And a lot of employers, again, they're not going to embrace all of it fully. I think a great starting point for employers is just making resources available, whether it's through other organizations or other companies, that says to the employees that, hey, we recognize that there are some things that are going on or things that we want to make sure that folks are able to address with our support, and here are the resources. It may be just that simple, or it may be resources with coaching, things of that nature. So it is something that the company has to grow into. It doesn't just start, and it's not always easy in the beginning. So yeah, and those are conversations that we have with employers when we're sending interns to work with them. We prepare the interns on our end as much as we can, and we continually coach them when they're placed. But right, there are some, traumas that may be hard for them to get past, or just bad habits. Sometimes it's not even trauma, it's just bad habits that they need to move away from. So the coaching, conversations, but really the employers have to embrace it. And a great example of that for us is American Water, which is in Camden. We send a lot of interns there. And, there are issues that do come up, but because of the support that we, give to those young professionals in partnership with the company, those folks are able to grow and, stay employed and grow professionally. It is a hard thing though. It's been easy because employers were starved for, they're like, hey, sure, whatever we gotta do, we can get folks up in here, but it's starting to look like that's gonna take a turn. And so again, employers that you work with, or even at your own workspace, it's a great way to or it's something to just bring up. Usually it's, our Hopeworks training team, they go into companies and they work with employers and staff and supervisors on how to do that. One of the things that one of the links in here is coaching, supervisory coaching. Like it goes really in depth. What really couldn't get into it, but it is a great resource to look at if you're looking at, again, developing leaders, folks new to the workplace, and just building a better culture at work. I mean, these are things that, that can be employed on a daily basis. Yes, sir.
I appreciate your comment. I was thinking, sorry, who's
who's
yours? Sorry. I was thinking a similar thing, and hearing, you talk it out, I kind of came to a bit of a realization of the way to look at it is there's a threshold as far as how severe the behavior is, and the frequency, and also the receptiveness of the individual to hear feedback. And so obviously if it's pretty severe and it's happening frequently, there may not be much time for that person. If it's kind of early stages and not so severe, I think what I've seen in some workplaces is the other people around them will start to grumble quietly, and people will start to kind of build up a case against that person. They're thinking, I'm going to wait till it's so bad, and then I kind of hit them with, hey, you've been doing these things for this long, and we're now at a point where we can't sustain this anymore. Versus going to that person early on and saying, hey, there's some grumbling, here's what's going on, can we work together, see if there's some receptiveness there? And rather than waiting, because even managers don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations. Oh, how are they going to react? And I don't want to be that person, but they'll gossip, or they'll say, they'll badmouth the person. So encouraging people to take that time early on and say, let's start working on these things.
And that's a big part of coaching. Go ahead.
And I was going to add, because I participate with clients, and we recently talked to people from Pakistan. So trauma over there is very taboo, and they ask the same question, and it's just, again, creating a safe environment. And obviously if someone it's a repeated thing and it gets worse and worse, the point is to nip it at the bud before it happens. So the sign is if the person's always late, you don't automatically assume it's trauma, but it's just to be aware, okay, something's going on. That person usually isn't late, something is happening here. How can we support that situation? So it's just letting the client or whoever employee person know that there's a support system, that, hey, you know, I hired you obviously because you have the great qualities, but you have to keep the great qualities going. And I see that you're slacking, but how can we help you? Because I don't want to, you know, lose that employee, or I don't want to lose that person. So how can I help you in this situation? So it's just to have and build that community, because I know from my past experiences working in certain environments, I felt I had no support, and it just weighed me down to the point where I was like, I can't be here. I have to take care of myself, because as much as I love the job, the work I do, it wasn't the right place for me. Like being at Hopeworks kind of changed the way I viewed things. It's like, wow, this is such a positive environment. Like there's a little ups and downs, but that's, you know, the flow of things. Like no one is perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect. Active listening, like I said, is the hardest part, because you always want to interject in the conversation. But the best way, again, to practice it is just to talk to your mom, talk to your dad, like really listen to them. Because again, you may miss something, and it could be a key to, okay, so this is why they're acting like this. Oh, this is why they're defensive, or just these behaviors. It's a pattern, and that's what you want to see. Notice the pattern before it gets worse.
I don't always talk to my mom and dad, but I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
So there's, we have something at Hopeworks called safety plans. And it is a plan that we have for ourselves that everybody practices every day, to make sure that we stay grounded. Very great way. I mean, when I first went to Hopeworks, we did it. I was like, what is this? Like, I gotta get to work. And it was really, it just sort of opened things up. And you know, when things are going on at work, or I feel uncomfortable about something, I feel comfortable talking about it at least to one or two people in the workspace. And you mentioned with the coaching, right? If you start the coaching, whether there's issues or not. I mean, coaching, if you look at it, if you're growing a leader, you're coaching someone to grow into a leadership position. It's the same approach. You're, you know, really hoping to maintain that person at that job doing it well, maybe coaching. I currently have a coach, and it's helpful. I mean, I find it really rewarding to get a different viewpoint of how I'm looking at something. At a point where I could say, well, I mean, I got this covered, I know it, I'm old enough, but it's great to have that different viewpoint. So always bringing that different viewpoint in with the coaching sessions makes such a difference.
Yeah, so at Hopeworks we have this thing called safety plans, which is to emotionally regulate yourself. So this is a great tool because, you know, especially during COVID, we've been isolated, we've been having feelings of frustration, or eating more or not eating more. So we've been through a lot of bad habits, and it's just kind of, when you're at a workplace, how can I not do those bad habits, or how can I emotionally regulate myself? Because obviously during a meeting you can't scream or throw things, or, you know, just not acting professional. So this is a professional way to emotionally regulate yourself. So this little activity I have, and you guys don't have to write on it, but this is a safety card. So this is where you would write your safety plan, and I'll give you guys an explanation in a second. Just want to hand this out.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You said when you first seen that safety plan, you was like, what is this? I gotta go to work. So how long did it take for you to like get in the habit of the safety plan? What was the adjustment like for you?
It took about a week, because it was something that I felt, but it was like, the workplace isn't a place where you can do that. But then also seeing others in action and how it was benefiting them, leaving at 5 o'clock on the dot was like such a unique experience for me. But they literally ushered you out the door to say, hey, you know, everyone goes home, everything is done. It was a great experience. And, you know, folks stick around sometimes, but now everybody's, you know, it's a part of maintaining your wellness and understanding how important that was. That was sort of the breakthrough for me, is understanding how important my wellness was, you know, in relation to everything else. And once I started to see the benefits from it, literally just from leaving at 5 o'clock every day, really had a great experience. And folks always coming around, hey, is everything all right? Or can I help you with that? I mean, then you start doing the same thing. Everybody's running around looking how they can help each other. It's an amazing experience. So that's how I really, how it changed me.
And there's two types of safety plans actually. So there's the invisible, the things that no one sees. And this is the easiest one to do because you guys do it without, knowing it. Like when you pray to yourself, or if you're a logical person, when you count down to 10, or you say the alphabet backwards, or, for me personally, I just take deep breaths, or I kind of just, list facts to myself because I'm a very logical person. It keeps me relaxed. So it's very helpful. I've seen a lot of people at Hopeworks, and it really changes them because when they're feeling frustrated or they feel like they don't understand stuff, because in the training room they have web development, so these are things they never did before. I can tell you, doing JavaScript, HTML, I felt not smart, but I was definitely getting through it. For me, it definitely helped me to regulate myself and not completely shut down. I worked for a very tough company at Staples, and it was a really horrible experience, but I didn't know how to emotionally regulate myself. I didn't know how to, speak anymore. I felt like unsafe. So being at Hopeworks, when I get to that moment where I feel like I'm about to shut down, or I feel silence or I can't speak, I definitely use my safety plan where I breathe, or not even that, just confide into my supervisors or someone I feel like I can trust with, hey, I'm not really, I'm feeling really nervous, or I'm kind of angry and frustrated at myself. Can we just have a conversation? So these are things you can use mainly in the workplace. So I want to discuss the invisible plan. So
Well, let me just say real quick, so a safety plan, I have 5 things on my safety plan, 5 things that I could do throughout the day if I feel like I need to. So just writing that, simple as listening to music, like lo-fi is always on blast at Hopeworks. Not out loud, but you can see folks will have their YouTube videos over in the corner listening to lo-fi and just, keeping calm. Caffeine is on my safety plan, plenty of that. Taking walks around the office. Little things like that help to clear your mind. Taking deep breaths, really big, and just looking forward to taking a walk at lunchtime. So.
Yeah. So an invisible safety plan. So this is internal. These are things to help you calm down that are done internally. Things people can't see you doing. These things can be done during a meeting, presentation. So example, taking deep breaths, prayer, saying the alphabet backwards. And I want to ask you guys, what do you have any invisible plans? What are things you emotionally regulate yourself? Like, have you ever had a situation in a meeting you felt so frustrated? Like, obviously you want to say something, but you can't, right? But what do you do internally to emotionally regulate yourself? If you guys have anything to share.
I'm not sure if this would be visible or invisible, but sometimes I will tap my toes inside my shoe, which is sort of just like a physical sensory thing that helps me. It's not something people can see, but it's not internal in my mind. So I actually don't know where that would fit.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit of both, but it's actually invisible because no one would know that you're doing that. So that's a good one. Does anyone have any other invisible, or I can get to visible because visible is the main thing people use too.
Yoga mantra.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge one. I see a lot of people, not even at Hopeworks, but my mom works in criminal justice, and I see her do that a lot. And I know she's doing it because she does this thing with her head where she's just nodding to herself. Okay, I got this. I got this. All right. So for visible, this is just the opposite. This is something external. This is things that people see you doing. This relies on something outside yourself, person, object, circumstances. These things may require bodily movement. So taking a walk around the room, a quick stretch, drawing, listening to music. So obviously you wouldn't be doing this in the middle of a meeting, but after a meeting, you go back to your cubicle, or if you have a space where you can just relax. For me, I have a pen that I sometimes fidget with because sometimes I get really nervous, and it's a way to emotionally regulate myself. Like I was nervous earlier this morning, but yeah, sometimes listening to music is impossible to do at workplace sometimes, but sometimes I see people just writing things on a notepad, and it could be a bunch of nonsense, no one knows, but you're doing something to emotionally regulate yourself.
Doodling.
Doodling,
is
yeah.
huge. I see a lot, I do a lot of doodling myself, but it's really helpful. It is.
Oh, yeah. Alright, so, this is the self-care plan, so this is something you do after work or before work, so, oh yeah, do you have a question?
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question
Yes.
about the visible safety plan?
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like stuff like this, in some instances, I feel like was one of the main reasons that people liked work from home so much, was because it felt so much easier and so much safer, like no
Yes.
pun intended, to be
Yeah.
like, I do want to go take a walk around the block,
Yeah.
or like I'm gonna meal prep my lunch, like take 20 minutes out of my day to do that. So I guess the question is kind of like, do you help, like, is part of what you guys are doing, looking at, like, having this conversation post-COVID, is part of that helping people be like, this is what you did at home,
Mhm.
this is now something that you can translate into doing it in the
Exactly.
workplace?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, making sure that there's space for that, or how that can happen, or what most folks are doing, they're saying, you know what? I'm gonna come in 3 days a week, and the other 2 days I'm working from home. Because, right, being at home, and the key word was safety. And once we felt safe working at home, it was hard to pull folks back in. If you're going back into an environment that doesn't feel as safe or has the same level of safety, then there's going to be resistance. So, we hear about all these companies, telling their employees, you must come in, you must come back in, and folks maybe just being at home, but it's the element of safety. So that's huge. And right, how do we translate that safety back into the workplace for ourselves?
Thanks.
I know we run training events, and one of the things we do is we put a bunch of fidget toys on the table.
Yeah,
And just
Yeah,
so
those
that
are-
people feel freedom to do that,
yeah, those are forms of safety plans, because the thing is, like, when you're so stressed, and this is something we do in our training, we get, like, neurological, you're pumping so much adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream, like, if you're ever sweating or your heart beats racing, that can affect you in the long run. That's why people get so sick, or, I don't wanna go to work anymore, and people prefer to be at home working because they can mostly regulate themselves and no one will know about it. So the point is like, how can we translate that to a workplace and it be professional, because that's the main point. You don't want to be laying down on your desk and everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, that's weird. As much as you want to do that, you can't. So it's how can we do this in a professional setting? And that's the main thing of Hopeworks is, okay guys, look, I get that you want to lay down and get you want to sleep, but be professional. And that's basically what we want to do.
And that's what the trainees, I don't want you to think that, we're walking around saying that to employees.
No.
A lot of the trainees, folks coming in that it's their first professional experience, helping them to understand what is professional and having conversations around that so that they feel comfortable, because it's a big adjustment.
So this is a fun video that I have for you guys today. So this is the Instagram self-care. So this is like stuff you would buy. Like, oh, I'm feeling myself. I want to treat myself to buying a new suit or buying my favorite guitar. Like, these are things that obviously it costs a lot of money. You don't do it as often, but it's a treat yourself moment. So this is a very fun video.
And just to say too, it doesn't have to be something
Right.
expensive. Something from Starbucks with a lot of cream and chocolate in it, that's what I look at as my Instagram self-care.
You want to turn up
Oh,
Yeah, right there.
okay.
Once a year, Donna and I spend a day treating ourselves. What do we treat ourselves to?
Clothes,
Treat yourself.
massages,
Treat yourself.
fine leather goods.
Treat yourself.
It's the best day of the year.
The best day of the year! The point of this is to pamper yourself. It's a one day a year I allow myself to be selfish.
Ooh, cupcakes.
Those are all for me, Jerry.
I would like 3 big-ass diamonds surrounded by their own set of tiny-ass diamonds.
Welcome to Nirvana, the plaza at Eagleton.
Needles in your face, pleasure in your face.
All the sushi is made from fish previously owned by celebrities.
This is Peter Bogdanovich saltwater eel.
Mmm, Bogdanov's delish.
If you could put big money on one thing, what would it be?
Treat yourself. In Beverly Hills.
Treat yourself in 2017.
And it's the biggest one yet.
I really want this dress, and I like this crystal beetle.
Cashmere socks, velvet pants. Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
This is insane.
You're gonna treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
I'm gonna treat myself.
Treat yourself.
I'm gonna go ahead and treat myself.
It's the best day of the year.
Yeah. So it's just a very funny video. Just like obviously you probably won't be buying a big diamond ring, but maybe you'll just go out to dinner once in a while. So now we're gonna go to behind the scenes self-care. So this is the less enjoyable one. This is the one that, you know, you have to do it, like doing your laundry or just getting out of bed, making your bed, brushing your teeth. So we have two types. So we have the daily. So these are things you need to do every single day to keep yourself on track. So for me, all the time, like I love a clean house. Like I just cannot function if anything is just not right. So I'm constantly always cleaning my room, the kitchen, bathroom, just so I can feel secure in myself. And then we have the other options, weekly. These things aren't scheduled as strictly, but must be done at least once during a given week. So this literally could be, again, anything. You know, it's not even planned. Sometimes you may decide to, for some reason, power wash your house. But for some people, that's just kind of self-care. Like people value their house, right? So might as well wash it at least once in a while.
And just to say, you can also use this on your kids. Don't call them chores anymore.
Nah.
Call them self-care activities. It might work. So one of the things, in just talking about, you know, tools that you can use in the office, just wanted to highlight first, working remotely was tough initially because the big question was, how do they know I'm really getting stuff done? Or what if they think I'm not getting anything done? That's huge. And so, you know, when we think about that, we'll actually get into that, but some of the biggest struggles with working remotely was unplugging after work. If you're working at home at the kitchen table, 5 o'clock comes, ready to start dinner, the computer is still there, you know, notifications are still going off, it became hard to sort of, the line became blurred. Loneliness, again, because now you know, you're essentially working in a silo. You're at home, unless you're inviting coworkers over, which I did not do. It can feel lonely. Collaborating or communicating, it was a struggle for a lot of folks. One, for technology issues, because if you didn't have high broadband, you know, some of those Zoom meetings didn't go well, or you were frozen, you know, throughout the whole meeting. Distractions at home, cats on the keyboard, and for me, we have 4 kids. Everybody was home. Yeah, so in there, you know, it was a lot. So, and they were distractions, and when things are going on, I mean, it's hard. You're in a meeting, and you're like, wow, I was going to change that, you know, change that window or do something, and I start thinking about that, and it became a distraction. Being in different time zones, which we all sort of mitigated because we were all in the same area. Staying motivated. I mean, again, the TV is right there, and you have Disney Plus. Like, I don't know. The Avengers always won with me, so like, report Avengers. Taking vacation time, and because you're working at home, you feel like you're already, like, I don't know. It was hard for me to take vacation or time off, because being at home kind of felt like time off, and you feel like you're asking for too much. But that was something that folks were dealing with. And again, finding reliable Wi-Fi, I'm sure that number is much higher. But again, with everyone at home, I thought we had great internet, but with 6 people on it, 2 Zoom meetings, everything got tested. But a great way, you know, one of the things that we started to do in terms of like different practices, everybody knows about Google Workspace now. Is there anybody who doesn't know about Google Workspace? And it's just Gmail, Calendar, Google Drive. It's a free, easy way to collaborate. If you're not already using, even Google Meets, which, I mean, I didn't have a Zoom account, we used Google Meets to meet. And what we also did was, certain staff, we would have virtual tea with each other. So we would, you know, just kind of dial each other up and have tea and just kind of chat. But it's a great way. If you don't know about Google Workspaces, it's incredible. Yes, sir.
I guess two comments that related to this list. The first one related to your interest in Marvel or whatever. And sometimes the Phillies have a 1 o'clock game on a Wednesday.
Come on, what are they?
You know?
Yeah.
But no, the second point just being that a lot of, or a handful of these, in particular in relation to when you have a new hire during working from home.
Mhm.
So you started off this slide with, am I doing this right? Am I meeting my expectations? Am I getting things done? You have that feeling anytime you start a new job,
Yeah.
let alone when there's no way to almost show you're being effective or efficient or doing your job on a daily basis. And so we went through that with a couple of new hires and making sure that they felt comfortable and understanding like, this is what our expectation is. We understand all these things are happening, working remotely. But then the next step to that was also getting them to feel connected to the company, and that was also a challenge. And I had to convince, higher ups to say like, can we just send them to a national conference that's part of our network, because they haven't had a chance to do any events with our team. So at least this will start getting them to, connect with the mission, understanding what they're part of, rather than just seeing everybody's living room wall, on the screen. So
Uber Eats gift cards were great too, because you could send someone an Uber Eats gift card, they could order what they wanted, and then you could have virtual lunch together. That was a great way to connect folks. But one thing that you mentioned, and we'll go into in the interest of time, KPIs, because the question of, am I doing my job? Am I meeting the goals and everything like that? KPIs are great for that, but the key with KPIs, especially remote working, is weekly check-ins to sort of go over, and we do that at Hopeworks, and it sort of keeps everyone focused on the path forward, and it removes those lingering questions of, am I moving towards this goal as I should be? And again, we have articles, I'll make sure that everyone gets one before they leave, but it talks about KPIs and remote worker harmony. It's a key tool to sort of push out those lingering questions about someone's feeling towards their own performance. Again, because we are over, I just wanted to touch on one other thing. So, how to support staff in a trauma-informed program. There's a lot of or trauma-informed ways. There's a lot of great examples, and what you'll find is that a lot of these things you are already doing, you just do it in a more formalized sense, and making everyone aware that it's available to them versus just, particular individuals. Across the board at Hopeworks, we have one lunchroom. We all eat in the lunchroom, where we use conference rooms. And really the conversations there, it makes everyone, like we're all people, and that sort of enforces that, regardless of what level they're at. But having the discussions with staff, or in staff, one of the questions in our staff meetings is, how is your self-care? Like, I've never had anyone ask me, hey, how are you doing, is very general, and we all have a response for that. But when someone says, how is your self-care, the first time they ask me, I really had to think about it. And you hear that weekly in those questions, and you start to think about it, so that you have a real response for them. Real simple question to ask, but those are things that you can include in supervisory meetings when you meet with folks. It is really helpful. And it really just gets folks to think about things that are already there, but you can share it and, you know, potentially, it makes you feel safe, one. And two, you find that other folks are going through the same thing. In my supervisory meetings, we talk about, I have a 13-year-old daughter, supervisor has a 13-year-old daughter, and the things that are similar, like, it's just great conversations to have. But if that's part of, you know, what's eating at my self-care and we talk about it, you know, you feel a lot better about it, just about yourself overall as well. So again, I have these articles, great articles. This one, putting trauma-informed supervision into practice. I think that this is the part that I really wanted to get to, but I'll make sure that the email, that the slides go out. There's actually a link right into it. It's a whole manual, I guess I would say, that it's really great to at least start to consider for yourself if you're supervising folks, or if you're looking to go to your supervisor to talk about, you know, incorporating some of these practices in your workplace. You know, especially when you're dealing with a company, they like to have the facts and, you know, sort of some of the benefits behind it. And this gives a ton of them, things that you can relate to. But again, as a supervisor, that's another place where if you have staff and they feel safe, then it makes it easier for you to give that guidance that, you know, may be necessary. If someone's late all the time or whatever the experience may be, you open that up and it makes it easier. They feel safe and you can have that real conversation about it. And I think that we will stop there because it's a little over 12, but a little past 12. But the Hopeworks training team, they'll come to your organization, to your company, and really go through the whole process of, you know, either how do you introduce this to your staff, and it's a great way to introduce it to your company and supervisors and what have you, so that they see the benefit and can actually feel it on their own, how it's going to, you know, potentially increase productivity, efficiency, making folks feel comfortable. And like all these things are very real right now, and you know, really wanting to hold on, whether we're, you know, things are going really well in the economy or we're in a recession. Every company wants to hold on to great employees. Just quick, I went to Google headquarters in New York day before yesterday, and man, like they have everything to keep you there. Like it's great, and you know, everybody was very friendly and things like that. And they talked a little bit about how they're even in that high demand environment, how they incorporate some practices like that as well. And it mainly shows up in supervision, but once everybody starts to feel that way, then, you know, just interacting in general just feels great, and you know, you feel like you're in a safe space. So if there are any questions, I mean, we're happy to stay afterwards and answer any questions, but I will make sure that these slides are available. And all the links are in there, and happy, I'll include my email as well, if folks want to reach out. Kate and Jace, and of course Ciara are the experts. So if there are certain questions that you have, feel free to reach out to them. They're looking forward to it. So any questions?
I do if there's time, but I can also ask you.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever you want to do.
Okay. I'm curious, in terms of like challenges working from home and specifically with the young people that you work with, on Zoom and like camera practice on or off. I don't know if you are requiring young people to come on camera. I know one thing I've noticed is like sometimes you do have distractions from home, or you don't have like a good setup or space to like put your device so that your background looks okay, or you just feel self-conscious about being on camera. And like, are you having conversations with young people about that? What sorts of things are you finding helpful?
Definitely.
All the time.
I was going to say that the recent meeting had to, when we had, so it was at Pakistan, and we're training doctors basically how to be trauma informed and what does that look like in an organization. And we like to strive for people to let's see faces, that way we have a sense of connection and kind of gauge what kind of feeling they're getting from us. But we just let them know, like, hey, like, if you don't want to have your camera on because of what's going on, you don't have to. Just, you know, raise your hand on the Zoom thing or kind of like type in, just be interactive in the conversation. So we're kind of expressing that you don't have to, but it'd be lovely to see your face, kind of thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, we always have that conversation.
Yeah, and we try to include it as a standard practice so that if you're not going to be, if your camera's not going to be on, at least reach out beforehand, let folks know, something like that, because the expectation is the camera's going to be on. If the camera's not on, I go to a meeting and the camera's not on and no one said anything, the whole conversation, I'm wondering, you know, if everything is okay,
Right.
or, you know, what the deal is. So it becomes a distraction when folks don't let you know before. Hold on one second. Yes.
Now, just on top of that, there's also like considerations for people with disabilities too, of why cameras are on and off. So like easier to read closed captions for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, things like that. So
Yes.
you brought up just anxious feelings. So like if people with autism that have higher rates of anxiety, so it's particularly social anxiety related to being on camera, which is different from being in space. So there's all that's out there too to check out.
And with Google Meets, it doesn't come with captions, but there's an add-on where you can add captions and also get transcripts.
So tricky.
Yeah.
I can't even figure that out. But yeah,
It's available.
it's there. Yeah, just kind of figure it out. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, as someone who does like a lot of this kind of facilitation and stuff like that, I try to set the expectation to ahead of time, like be really clear with what I hope people will do for the workshop, that they have that prep, like it goes out in the meeting invite that they get 2 months before, you know, so like they know that this is a meeting where I would like you to be in a place where you feel as comfortable as you can, you're wearing something that you'd be okay on camera, you know, like, and I think, you know, I've done that with like staff meetings and that kind of thing too, like giving people a heads up, this one's casual, and like if you, like I'm gonna be in pajamas, if you wanna be in pajamas too, that's okay, or like, this is one where, you know, I mean, the more information you can give people, I think the better. I just thought there was like I don't know, it was probably on TikTok, but I'm old, so I probably saw it like on Instagram, like from TikTok, because I don't have TikTok. But like, you know, when you send someone a calendar invite that just says like quick check-in, like if you're someone that has anxiety or that's neurodivergent, like that, to not have any context around what a quick check-in means, like you just see that pop up on your calendar and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting fired.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what this is. So, you know, saying something like quick check-in, debrief from TLC conference, you know, like giving, just being cognizant of like how much information you're giving people ahead of time so that they can mentally and like physically prepare for whatever conversation is about to happen.
And it helps them participate,
Yeah.
you know, and if I know what the conversation is about, I can be prepared.
Right, be prepped.
Yeah, absolutely. And Google, what I do with Google Calendar, I'll try to include an agenda, even if I haven't, like, not detailed, but just like a quick overview to give that insight in terms of what we're going to be touching on.
And what we do is like, even through the pandemic, was we would have these twice a month check-ins, and it was like, no work conversation allowed.
Yeah,
This is just for us to talk together, you know, and check in on each other.
Yeah, that's great. All great practices. We practice from, we have safe practices at work, it's not formalized, you know, and it might be between one or two people. So thank you everyone for being here. Feel free to come up and grab some of the resources that we have available. I really wish we could have done the trauma-informed pins with their, or the pins, the safety plan pins with them.
Yeah.
But you know, and you know, for Hopeworks, we are open. You can stop in for a tour at any time, no reservation, and you know, we'll be in Philly by December, January. So if you're in the neighborhood in Kensington, stop by, see what we're about. Thank you.